this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday morning chat today is about things that go wrong and hopefully knowing why and not doing it again. It's not always possible. Our passion for our orchids, especially if you're in the pretty blooms must have, zombie mode must have, you get it home and then you think, where the hell am I going to keep that? Is that going to do okay? It's better to put those thoughts in first and then do pretty blooms must have and it'll do fine. It doesn't always work like that. I'm as guilty as anyone, don't get me wrong, I do daft things. And in here, the first daft thing I've done, and it's expanded over the years, is you start with a core of orchids and you adapt your environment for those orchids. And then you start playing silly bees and thinking, I wonder if I could grow one of those. And it's not an ideal environment from them. You start expanding your collection. And there's problem number one. I've always said there's no such thing as a difficult orchid. The difficulty is getting the environment right for a happy, thriving orchid. And I've got orchids that are classed as cold growers up to warm growers. I've only got one environment. So on those two extremes, those plants struggle. Is it a silly thing to get them? Maybe yes. I mean, I could rationalize in here, decide my minimum temperatures, giving me my temperature range. I've got artificial lighting now, so I can keep day lengths right, and I could select plants ideally suited for that range. But the number of different orchids I would have would dramatically reduce. But then within that range of orchids, I could expand the numbers. So it wouldn't mean having a small collection, but some plants would need to be excluded. Now, the one thing I wouldn't do is grow cool. I'm attached to the house. I've got an awful lot of glass around here, and keeping cool in the spring, summer and into autumn is damn near impossible. So that would just be a daft idea for me. Now, if I had a place where I could have a greenhouse that never got any sun on it, ever. So the only thing that would raise the temperature is the outside air temperature. That's quite controllable, yeah? So that would be an option. But I haven't got anywhere to put a greenhouse. It's not my house, it's not my garden. I can't go doing too much around here. And I have a limited life in these premises. Well, that's a problem that's going to come one day. I'm going to have to get out and find somewhere else. And where are all the orchids going to go? I'll worry about it when it happens, although I have plans. So, things that can go wrong. Your first and foremost thing that's going to go wrong is getting a plant that's not suitable for growing in your choice of environments. Now, if you're growing in the home, you might think, well, I've only got one environment. No, you haven't. As far as light levels are concerned, you've got many. You've got north-facing windowsill, right up against, not too close to the glass, especially in the winter. But you're not going to get any sun on a north-facing window. Or northeast, northwest. The only sun you might get is a glimpse of it in midsummer as it sets or rises. So you've got an area that gets no sun. That's reasonable light. It's never going to be bright light on a north-facing window. So their high light orchids are not going to do well there. Yeah. All right. Swing your house round, because most houses have got at least two sides if they're terraced, and if they're detached, possibly four sides. You've got four choices of window aspects. South-facing windows, certainly in northern hemispheres, are going to get sunshine. And when do they get their sunshine? In the middle of the summer? No. In the middle of the summer, the sun's up there. And it comes in at such an angle that you often get windows that are very, very bright, but very little actual physical sun, because the sun's so high in the sky. But in spring and autumn, it's streaming in the windows. Yeah? And then you've got west-facing and east-facing, different light aspects. So in a home, light is quite easy to control. What about temperatures in the home? Well, most people don't sit around in their hat, scarf and gloves, do they? They like to be comfortable. So within those comfort zones, most houses cool down a bit at night. Most people don't keep their home at a very even temperature 24/7. They tend to have the heating on when they're up and about, and when they're tucked up in bed it drops down a bit. So you've got that difference between night and day. That's good. All orchids like a bit of that. Some like it a lot more than others. Some of them absolutely need it or they won't bloom. And it is that difference that kicks them off. So you've got comfortable temperatures. So that gives you a range of orchids that are going to be happy within the home. Now you can push your luck in the home. The one thing you normally lack in a home environment is humidity. We've got some orchids in here that are high humidity lovers, and in some cases, even though I keep my humidity pretty good, it's sat at 65 at the moment, but then it's not very warm in here, but I've got orchids in here that would prefer to be at 90% permanently and up to 100 at night. Well, they haven't got the humidity they really need, so they don't do as well as they could, but they're actually doing okay. So that was a risk, and it sort of worked. Hasn't worked across the board. My Restrepias do okay, and they are the real highlight ones. My Masdevallias and Draculas don't need quite so much humidity, but they still like it high. Yeah? They're sort of doing okay. I wouldn't say they're doing brilliantly, but the ones I've got left, because I've lost a lot, I bought an awful lot of Masdevallias in the earlier days, and they keeled over left, right and centre. In those days, I couldn't keep my humidity up because I didn't have Hurricane Hector down there, the hydrofogger. I had little misters struggling to keep the humidity up at the worst time when it was warm. When those plants don't want warm, they want cool. And when it's cool, it's a lot easier to keep the humidity up. So therein potentially is your problem in the home. It tends to be warmer in homes, and keeping the humidity up is a bit of a problem. You know, if you start getting lots of foggers going, you'll end up with green carpets and curtains, and it won't be a happy environment because you will start getting mould in places. You can't keep humidity that sort of, you know, at 70+% in a home. It just doesn't work so well. But a lot of orchids will be happy with 50 to 60, and that can be done in a microclimate with a little mister, yeah, something like that. I personally don't recommend spraying plants, but some manage okay with it. It does raise the humidity out around the plants, and it stops their leaves drying out so fast, so it can work. But static water in leaf joints and places like that that sits there for any length of time can cause problems. It's a breeding ground for bacteria and the like, yeah, that can cause problems. So what else can go wrong? Well, sometimes things go wrong and you'll never know. I've got a classic example. Once upon a time, I had an absolutely stunning Dendrobium harveyanum. Beautiful blooms, and it bloomed its head off, and it bloomed and bloomed and bloomed. And then it stopped blooming and went very quickly. And it virtually died. And I still have not got a clue why. It was doing so well. What I got left was a little piece on a mount that's been sat on that mount now some considerable time. It hasn't dropped its leaves, but it's done nothing. No new roots, no new growths from the base. It's stalled totally, and I don't know what it's going to do. Now, it's highly unlikely to do anything through the winter, and a short while ago we had a little flower spike started to grow, which came straight off. That is a weak plant. There's no way I'm allowing that to bloom. So that's one piece, and it's doing nothing. Now, the original plant was on a mount and it was over the moon. Happy plant, bloomed well, great, everything great. And why it went down, I don't know. Well, that was one bit. The other bit I put in a pot. And again, it hasn't dropped its leaves, but this one's grown a new growth. Now these canes should be 3 times that size at least, so that's a small new growth, but it's a healthy new growth with nice leaves, and it's pushed out some roots. So this piece should make it. Both of those pieces were the same. One's taken off, or started, so it's taken off like a rocket, but it's on the move. The other one's done nothing. It may kick off again perhaps in the spring, who knows? So I don't know what went wrong with that plant. I will never know. But all you can do when something goes wrong like that is, if you've got enough of a plant left to try and rescue, you try and rescue it. You do what you can. Another classic example of something that was doing incredibly well that is probably now for the bin, unfortunately. My little Arangus fastuosa bloomed every year, and last 2 or 3 years 2 spikes. The crown has completely rotted. And I know why. I know exactly why. The one thing that changed this year was laziness. Laziness kicked in due to the increase in plant numbers, but we started watering with the sprayer. Not necessarily first thing in the day. That's the only thing that changed. Water on the crown on that one took it down. Now it did try and put a new leaf up a while ago and failed, and its last new leaf is now rotten. So the plant's had it. It's a it's a sympodial orchid. It grows from the crown, but occasionally these type of Arangus will push out a plantlet from the side. There's no sign of it, so I would say that's a goner, but I'm not chucking it for a while. It's still got leaves on it. It's actually growing a new root down in there, unless that's going to be a new plant from the stem. That'll be good. It just went, but that one I know why. So don't do it again. You know, if you bang your head against the wall and it hurts, if you want it to stop hurting, you stop banging your head against the wall, basically. Another Arangus that just did not like being taken off of one mount and being remounted. It's going. It's really in a bad way. It's got leaves coming off left, right and centre. This was a lovely little plant, lovely wavy curly leaves. But it's not dead, and it does have 3 effective leads on it. So 3 individual plants off a single stem. It's not going to grow much now if it's going to make it, because it's cooler, and this would prefer to be warm. But it's not gone. The roots are still hydrating the plant, but that just seriously objected to being taken off of one mount and put on another one. But the mount was rotting badly. It was starting to flake and break away. So I couldn't leave it there. I had to do something, and it didn't like what I did. So at least I know what went wrong, but in that case I didn't have a huge amount of choice. It will recover, I suspect, that one. It's still got its 3 crowns. Its 3 little plants have still got their crown. So we should do okay. Another classic example. This one over here. This is an Aliciara, and this struggled for years. It just wouldn't grow. Put up some new growths, they failed. Didn't like something. Unknown. And I thought, well, if you won't grow in a flipping pot, let's give you a go on a mount. Now I wouldn't say that's fully recovered yet, but it has put a new growth out, and it's grown some new roots. It tried to put a new lead up that end and didn't really succeed, but nonetheless there's a lead there. Even though that's not a good growth whatsoever, the next one might be. And we also had a growth here. So that's done better since it was mounted. But why didn't it do well in a pot? It's just an Oncidium intergeneric, like all the others I've got. That one would not grow. Maybe it had an inherent problem deep inside. Hopefully that's been sorted, if it ever did. Who knows? So that's that. What else? Struggling things. This Miltonia, Queen Anne, this came from Madeira with two others, heavily infested with Fusarium. Grr. And what we did this year was we had a nice new growth at each end. A nice new growth up this end decided to push a spike out, and some clumsy idiot broke it. Yeah? So this lead at this end was trying to bloom and got stopped. What are the consequences? Consequences are 1, 2, 3 new growths. Now you see where I say sometimes it's worth taking a spike off to invigorate a plant, put the strength into the plant, because pushing up a spike and the blooms and everything and holding them there takes some energy out of the plant. So that lead up that end's got 3 new growths. It's got a normal one coming out the base, another one coming out the side, and one coming up from the first leaf bract. So 3 new growths. Up this end, however, we had quite a weak growth. And then we pushed up another growth that isn't even mature yet, and this time I haven't broken the spike. So this end is going to bloom. And what's this end doing? 1 little new growth. I'm not resting my case because there could be other things going on, but this end is not as vigorous. But looking at it, it never was. This one pushed out with similar size growths, yeah, this one and this one are successive ones, whereas when it comes this way, that was its one, followed by that one, and then this one. So this end's not as vigorous. Even that's a joined plant, it's not 2 separate plants. So that one's acting a little strange, but possibly understandable. I think this would have been a really good spike up this end if some clumsy idiot hadn't broken it. Nevertheless, we now have 4 new growths, yeah? And this one will mature. It'll carry on maturing even after it's bloomed till it gets probably up to full size. And at that point it might decide to push out another one. But yeah, that never did well in a pot. It's done a lot better since it was mounted. Now I've forgotten where I got it from. Over there. So that's a Oncidium intergeneric type. And the problem with the Oncidium intergenerics is trying to find out what the hell's in it, especially with the name changing that's going on. You get something like Colmonara. It's a made-up name. It's an intergeneric name comprising of bit of that, and a bit of that. Well, when that changes its name and becomes the same as that bit, you then haven't got a bit of that and a bit of that. You've only got one bit. So the name becomes irrelevant because it doesn't work anymore. And with the name changing that's going on and reclassifications in the Oncidium Alliance, there's a lot of that going on. So a lot of those made-up names don't necessarily tell you what's in it anymore. And you've got varieties in there. Miltonias, like reasonable light, yeah? The Odontoglossums don't. Well, you've got a bit of each in, somewhere in between's probably a good guess, but can you find out whether you've got a bit of each in them? You might have an Oncidium species or an Oncidium hybrid in there. They don't mind heat. Yeah? So, varieties, and all we can do is do what we can. There's another one up here that was failing miserably in a community pot because the roots were just staying far too wet. So we took it out and put it on a mount. And since then, it's done nothing, and it's doing nothing. But there again, that was quite a major disturbance. There's 4 pieces on there, I think, maybe even 5, and they're all relatively small. But that's not doing well at all. That is not happy. But it hasn't been done long, and it's now cool. So that's probably just stalled, resting, so there's no point in keeping it soggy. It gets watered with the other mounts. And in the spring, when the warmer weather and the longer natural daylight comes, that could kick off. It might not even make it till the spring, who knows. But what went wrong with that was keeping the roots soggy. So I know what went wrong with it. The idiot Roger just left it in that situation too long instead of dealing with it. And therein lies another problem that you can have. Workload. You know, I mean, all the books will tell you, repot your orchids in the spring. Yes and no. I always say repot your orchid when it needs repotting first. Secondly, when you've got new roots growing, and that's not always in the spring. But there is a predominance of things that will come round for a repot at that time of year. That's quite a big workload. It gets expensive as well. You've got to get all your new media in if you haven't got any left from the previous year. I mean, I'm short on the large bark at the moment, but then what I use the large bark for is mainly the holy clay pots. And none of those have been in their pot years and years and years, so they're not going to need doing. So I haven't got that set to worry about come the springtime. Or, in the case of the Cattleya Alliance, when the new roots are growing. Can't stress that enough in those types. What else? Things that have... Right, let's have a look at some of the Latorias, because all of those went wrong, and I know exactly why they went wrong. I read up on them because I wanted some and I had none. And then suddenly I got quite a few, like 37 buses, they all came at once. You can look that up. But basically, I got some. And you read up about them, where they come from. They get a wet season and a drier season. They don't get cold. So, quite like the Phalaenopsis type, they could be classed as continuous growers. They can push up new growths at any time. But their predominant growing season is the wet season. Yeah? So drier in winter. But then I didn't quite appreciate the fact that they were not going to like my drop in temperatures in the winter. And that was stress for them. And on top of that, they got put in pots because I believed they were continuous growers. So they should be okay in pots. That was my theory. Unfortunately, because they slowed right down and stopped in the winter, those pots wouldn't dry out. Rotten roots. So we then started the next year trying to recover some roots. The plants were still looking okay at that point. And then we got the beast from the east. So we had not only my minimum temperatures supplied by the heater at night, we had no day temperatures. That went on for weeks and weeks and weeks into March. And what was that followed by? A heat wave in April. Ugh. So I know what went wrong, but all I could do really was get them out of their pots and get them on some mounts so that I can control the temperatures in the winter. The watering in the winter. Now some are starting to recover. Unfortunately, I did them en masse. None of them have got tags on, and some of them may never bloom. They might not make it. Some may recover and eventually bloom, at which point I can go, that's what you are. But this was two little pieces, and this did nothing for some time. This one did nothing for much longer, but this one up here has pushed up two little new growths and some roots, so it's coming back. This little piece down here did nothing for a lot longer, and this one has two little growths, but not much sign of new root activity. But it's got, for a small plant like that, it's got enough roots to keep it hydrated. Yeah? But now I can control them in the winter. So they're going to slow right down to a stall because of the temperatures, but they won't have soggy, wet roots that rot. So they should hang in there. So I know what went wrong, and pretty easy to put it right, quite honestly. Most of these look in a bit of a sorry state, quite honestly, but win some, lose some. This is another one. I haven't got a clue which one it is. Now this one didn't dump all of its leaves. It managed to keep some, but it's been sitting there doing nothing since it was mounted. Absolutely nothing. And just now, as we go into the coldest period, it started two tiny little new growths. And I've got to go ultra careful when I water this, that no water gets on that base until those new growths are well up with leaves open. So I've got to be very careful and water this from there downwards. Now that one's got for the size of the plant. That's not bad roots, and some of those are newish. So that one's going to recover, I suspect, providing I don't lose those two new growths. They're very recent, they've only just started. So that one's coming on. Got a feeling that might be rhodostictum. Who knows? We'll know when it flowers, won't we? Well, most of these are perched up here. They get some of the artificial lighting, but they don't get the brilliant light. It's not in the not too distant future. My shade netting's come off. The last thing I want is them getting direct sun. They don't need any of that. Now this one, when I mounted it, took off quite quickly, and it pushed up quite a few new growths, and they got to less than half size and stopped growing, and their leaves are not happy, but at least it tried. So it made a start. It dumped virtually all of its leaves up here, and these canes are starting to totally desiccate. They'll have to come off soon. When you see a cane like that on a Latoria type, that is now useless. Once it goes yellow and brown like that, it can't store anything. It's had it. This one can probably store a little bit still, possibly these two, but that one's gone. Just as well come off. This one buried in here, that can come off. But round the front here, there's another one that can come off. But coming round the front, we did get some new growth, and then nothing happened for some time. And again, recently, I've just got a new growth coming up in there. If you can see it, light level's not brilliant, but it has another new growth. Now, that one may stall halfway up. That one may push on a bit better. Because although these leaves aren't good, at least they're there. So this can now photosynthesize better than it did with the three leaves it had left from its previous guys. This did push out a few roots, then stopped. So that's now in a state of stall, but it's trying a new growth. Again, not the best time of year to be doing that, but at least it's trying. So that's some of the Latorias. What about a Cattleya then? This is one of the little Cattleyas that came out of the big box. And this one just keeled over. Unknown. Reasonable root system for a small plant. That's a young plant. It may be a miniature, but I'm classing it as a young plant. And given what's in it, it's got Leopoldii in it. It's about that big. But the other stuff that's in it might be real, this could end up being a medium size, the combinations. But it pushed up two new growths and they failed. And now it's pushed up another one that's like half size and quite a discoloured leaf on it. But it did push up a new growth that stayed there. Reason that one went down? It's with several other Cattleyas on exactly the same mounts, kept in exactly the same place. The others are doing okay. That one didn't. Reason? Unknown. It's now managing a new root as well. But that's probably going to need warmer weather before it starts getting going again. That could be years and years off of blooming. Now we'll have a go that you won't like. If that is years and years off blooming, why am I keeping it? And in here, there are quite a lot of plants in that category. Now some of them have come in as gifts. Some of them were bought as blooming sized plants and blooming well weren't. We've all had that, haven't we? But given the number of plants in here and the workload, I could knock 30 plants off my list. Just either give them away or chuck them. Rationalise the collection on those that are not earning their keep and will not do so for a hell of a long time. Is it worth it? Well, at the moment, I'm saying yes, it is. But there's an air of doubt in my mind. Sometimes I do wonder, is it worth struggling to get things going? It's like going back to this Harveyanum here. I've got one in a pot that's growing. Why am I keeping that one as well? But it's not in the way. But it does need some work. My little Victoria Regina. that's donkey, well, I won't say donkey's years, but that's a long way off ever blooming. Again, it was a gift, and it was a leafless cane effectively, and another little bit sticking out there. Well, it's managed to push up a little tiny new growth this year, and it is tiny, and it hasn't actually finished growing. It's still got another leaf coming, and a couple of roots, not many, but buried down in there, much to my annoyance, is another new growth. And what's it doing? It's going up behind that cane. But I think it'll manage to come out the top. So it may have another new cane coming, but it's a long way off being a good plant, isn't it? And that's on the top of my list, Victoria Regina. And I want one that looks like that. And quite honestly, I don't care what it costs. If I can find a Victoria Regina on a size like that, with a root system, I don't care what I pay for it. So if you've got one I can have, get it, well I was just going to say get it in the post, but don't get it in the post. And then we go on to another daft thing. As you know, my Psychopsis alba got dumped quite a long time ago. That failed miserably. And the other one I hung on to for ages and ages on the grounds the spike did carry on blooming, but the plant didn't grow, wouldn't grow, manky leaves, an atrocious looking individual. So I eventually gave up on it. That's now gone. So I now have none, and I want one. And I've been a bit of a silly Billy because I noticed on eBay, I wasn't actually looking for that, but I thought actually that's a pretty good plant. It's got a new spike growing, and it's on eBay as an auction. So I thought, why not? Yeah, let's see. So I put a bid in, and it's still currently the winning bid. And then I had another think. What's the weather doing at the moment? Is this an ideal time to be putting a warm growing orchid in a box and transporting it across the EU to the UK, where we're lucky to get flipping 8 or 9 degrees during the day at the moment? So it might not have been the best of ideas. So in the back of my mind, I'm hoping somebody outbids me, so that I don't get. I'm not getting into a bidding war with it, because on reflection, it was a daft time of year to buy that type of plant. Another one will come up when the weather's better. On the Latoria ground, they were all in similar conditions. Why didn't that one go over? That one didn't go over. That's coming into bloom. 2 spikes on 2 different canes there. There's no sign of any growth at the base at the moment, and that's still in a pot with a good root system. And what size pot is it? It's tiny. And what's it got in it? Bark. Does it stay wet for ages? No, because I didn't put moss in it like I did with the other lot when I potted them, because I thought they were continuous growers. So you adapt, and you make mistakes, and you try and work out why, if you can, not always, and put it right. And if you think something's gone wrong or is going wrong, deal with it. Don't keep putting it off. It'll make it worse. What else can I have a quick look at? Not a lot, really. This I forgot to say. Yesterday, Orchid Society meeting, and I took in a bit of Kuniko for Lynn, because she's been desperately trying to get hold of that for ages and couldn't find one, and I had a nice piece that lent itself to coming off. It was in fact a kiki, but it had a cane with some leaves, a leafless cane, and a little new growth. So I thought, and some roots. So, and she promptly gave me that, and that is, it says on here, Dendrobium aberrans. Now I had that once, and I've also got aberrans in a couple of primary crosses, but I'm not sure I've still got aberrans, the species. It could have been one of the Latorias that went down, but knowing what it should look like, that's a tiny plant. It's got a lot of work to do, but it does have a little new growth there, and it has got some roots. It's in moss at the moment, which this time of year is not ideal, but it's in such a small amount I can probably control that. Excuse me. More coffee. Now I got a risk element. Moss obviously holds a lot of water. If you don't put a lot of water in it, it doesn't. Now it is possible to control sphagnum by putting the smallest amount of water on, which will disperse and become next to nothing. So just about keeping it hydrated. If I pour water on that, it'll be soaking wet and it'll stay wet for ages, even though it's in an open basket. Yeah, I could take the risk and take it out of there and put it on a mount now. But it's not really, even though it has got a new growth coming. So 50-50. Leave it as it is and try and go very, very careful with the watering, and then deal with it when it probably comes into some better growth when the warmer weather comes back. Or mount it now and risk setting it back possibly. And there again you go to experience. When you repot or remount or take one out of a pot and put it on a mount with a mature plant, you're virtually guaranteed to set it back. Do it with a young plant and you're probably not. So I could probably get away with that, mounting that one, and it would be fine. Right, next thing, things that go wrong. The guy speaking yesterday was a Masdevallia grower, and he grows in what most people would call a tiny little space. It's a 6x8 greenhouse, and he's got the whole thing shaded totally, and his light source is from above. So his light source is controlled at the top. There's very little light comes in from the sides. That's how he's set it up. And he grows almost vertically. So obviously he goes in the door and walks down one side of it, and all of the other side is plants, right up to the roof almost. And two things he said. First of all, he's been to where the Masdevallias grow, and he did a lovely diagram of a big triangle representing a mountain, yeah, with the various bands of the temperature ranges at those elevations, right up to the cold growers, yeah? And down in the bottom corner was a little tiny triangle, and that was Ben Nevis, our highest mountain. And out of a triangle that big, Ben Nevis was down here. We haven't got anything like that in this country, so we don't appreciate what going up does to temperatures. Two things he said. The lower down they are, the more heat tolerant they are. Yeah? The higher up they are, up through cool into cold. And some of those can go down to freezing at times and still survive. And then he showed a magical picture, which opened a lot of eyes, including mine. When you read up about Masdevallias, everywhere you read, it says shady, doesn't it? And he said, shade is subjective. If you've ever been skiing or up the mountains, what's the air like? It's clean, crystal clean. There ain't no pollution up round there. So how much light gets through compared with down here in the UK with all these cars and muck and stuff? It's a lot stronger. Yeah, it's clean, clear air. Then he showed a picture of Masdevallia Veitchiana growing in some grass on a hillside. No shade whatsoever. And it was happy and it was blooming. So he said that he keeps his Masdevallias in quite bright light. None of this deep shade nonsense. He's been there, seen it, done it, got the t-shirt. He said even in the montane forests, the level of light is better than you think. Just because you're under a tree canopy, the intensity of the light's still better. So he grows his in quite bright light. And since he started doing that, they're almost in constant bloom. Whereas before, they weren't. Don't believe everything you read. And the other thing he said, which I've been told off once before by somebody else for a different reason, I got told, get your Miltonias away from those fans. I thought, well, they like air movement. Yeah, gentle air movement. A fan desiccates leaves. It draws away the humidity, pushes it away. Now, if you can keep all of the humidity really high, including the air that the fan is moving, it's not such a dramatic effect. But that guy said, don't get Masdevallias in the way of a fan. Keep your air moving by blowing the fan in a different direction. It'll drift round. But he said for the same reason, if you have plants in the direct line of fire of fans, you'll desiccate the leaves. They will lose more humidity than can get back into the plant, so they start to dry off. I got one there, sat there right in front of a fan. I'm going to lift the camera off for a minute. Am I? Yes, I am. So I was trying to work out how the hell the thing was fixed then. Clatter, bang, thump. Right, let's get it back where it normally goes. Flick the screen round. And we're back to normal. Spot the difference. I've shut them off. Now, I've always thought they gently keep the air moving, and that's my cold growing Masdevallia that I thought, well, I can keep that really cold by sticking it right in front of the fan. I chatted and the guy said I would seriously rethink that. If you've got reasonable humidity and a buoyant feel to your grow room, it doesn't feel all dank and stale, then I'd shut them down. So I have. I've turned the lot off. And we will have a look and see what happens, because quite honestly, as Masdevallias go, this one ain't doing bad. Number of new growths? Many. They're coming out all over the place. This recently has taken off. So I can hear some people thinking out loud saying, well, if it's doing really well, why have you changed its environment? Is it doing really well? Are these leaves nice and firm and shiny? The answer is no. They are a little dry in their feel. So I'm going to give it a go. And as I said, that is Ignea. That's a cold grower, not cool, cold. So this is coming into its happy time now, and it would be ever so nice if it decided to push a couple of flipping flower spikes up. But at the moment, I'm happy with the new growths, because the new growths are also pushing new roots out. So it'll increase its root system. So fans are off, and we will think about our fans in future. Now the big ones don't necessarily cause a draft, and they are in a position where there's no plants close enough to be called in a direct line of fire. Blast the leaves off. These are relatively powerful. I do keep them on low, but the plants are far enough away to not desiccate the plants. Yeah, so things that can go wrong. Sometimes it's not your fault. Often it's not your fault. Often it's just you've got a bad plant in the first place. Tolumnias. Now a lot of my Tolumnias are doing pretty good. Not all of them. This one here, which is, it's decided to be two plants. It wasn't once upon a time, but it's headed off in two directions and left the bit in the middle, although there is a new leaf coming up there. But it's now pretty obviously two plants. But both of them have got a spike coming. Yeah. This plant was a bit behind, the top one, but it's coming on. This was classed as a rescue a while ago, hit badly by scale. Well, they all did, and some of them suffered enough to be dumped. They just didn't recover. This one here, that's a smashing Tolumnia plant. Yeah, it's growing in many directions. It's currently got 3 spikes on it. Well, that's doing well. They're not all doing well, and they're not all that big. That's a mature plant. Had that one a while. This one is not. Or is it? It's bloomed, so it's blooming size, but it's nowhere near that big, is it? And that's because this is a smaller Tolumnia. They're not all big plants, and some of them are really miniatures. So that's a smaller one. Well, that's currently got 3 new growths. 4 if you count the one maturing round the back. That's growing well. That was a rescue, but not anymore. Have I got a rescue? Have I still got any? Look, no, here's one. That's a rescue. Yeah, again, it's a small one. It's never going to grow that big, but that's sat doing nothing for ages. And it's only just recently decided to push up that tiny little new growth at the base. Actually, there's two. So, we're off. We're up. Three! I can see three new growths on that tiny little plant. See if I can put it somewhere where I can poke my finger with a bit of light so you might be able to see. Got one here, and one here. Oh, and one in the middle. 4 new growths on that plant. So providing they all make it, I'd say that one's made it. On such a tiny plant, that's going to treble its size. Yeah, so some things just suddenly start growing for some reason. That plant's been sat doing nothing for ages. And now it's just decided to grow. Oh, these things happen. Here's another one. This is a wrong un. This actually came out of the big box. And it's a cross of one I already had, but the cross is the other way round. So this one's actually registered with a name, which is Memoria Christa Erdmann. And it's effectively a Griffithianum and Farmeri cross. This one didn't like the media it was in, so it stalled. It got some serious problems with its leaves, most of which have now come off. And the few that are left aren't too bad, but the new growths aren't doing too bad. So whatever was wrong with it has possibly been solved, and we've got another new growth coming up here. But the main thing that's different is what it's in. No moss. Yeah, this is a drier in winter. Well, the only way I can keep it drier in winter is to have it in a media that doesn't stay wet long. So it went in larger bark. And it seems to be responding by pushing some new growths at an odd time of year. So, recovering, doing okay. Its sister plant, which you can't really see, my one, the one that I've had some years, is that bundle of leaves at the back there. When that one got repotted, it flopped over in all directions and would not stand up. So I just tied the whole lot together. So all the older canes just got bundled up together. Now that's pushed out a couple of new growths as well. So that's coming on. So there we go. Things that can go wrong, and a lot of it is not the best choice of plant, shall we say. If you establish what your environments are, and then work plants into those environments that should do okay, you'll still make an odd mistake. You'll still choose one that sounded okay, and then you get it, and it just doesn't seem to work very well. Well, like I always say, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, you'll get the same results. So if a plant doesn't seem happy, move it. The simplest thing you can change is to move it. Just put it somewhere else, and see what happens. It might perk up. It might get worse. In which case, move it again. But try something different. Something's not doing very well. Try something different. My Nellie Isla virtually died, and then for some reason it just recovered. And part of that reason was it went in a small pot. And now it's deciding to push up 2 spikes on a silly little growth like that, one of which I'm going to take off. There's not enough plant there to support 2 spikes. And I haven't seen my Nellie Isla bloom for quite a long time. And it looks like we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, that looks like a 5 or 6 bud spike. That's a lot for such a small plant. So as this spike gets to a point where I can see it properly, I'm going to take that one off. I'm going to let that one bloom, but I'm not going to let the blooms have their lifespan. We'll have a look at them, get them on video, appreciate them, then take the spike off early. The reason being, it's probably not going to produce another new growth until those spikes are gone. And that will trigger its hormones into saying, we need some new growths now. So I'll get my new growth quicker that way. So there we go. That went on quite a long time. But yeah, choose plants suitable for an environment you've got. And don't always believe what the books say. when you get somebody who hybridizes their own Masdevallias and gets them registered, in other words, breeds their own from seed, you can't mericlone Masdevallias, they won't have it. So if you want more Masdevallias, you either split up a big plant or grow from seed. Those are your choices. And when a guy does that successfully, and he says they do much better in brighter light, well, then we have a go with some brighter light, you know. And I've seen somebody who grows Masdevallias have a look round their grow room, and it's a sea of green, and they're beautiful plants. And there's a bloom over there, I think. Ooh, maybe one over there. And that guy showed his grow space, which is tiny, and everywhere was a mass of blooms. So it works. Yeah. So sometimes the practical experience, trying something a bit different, and finding it works, dispels some of the myths. We like doing that. I love doing it. A lot of the books just repeated what somebody else said, and what somebody else said was a bit hit and miss in places. So, you know, it just gets perpetuated. These myths just get progressed, and you get people that have been growing 50, 60 years, and they got their information in those days, and they tend to stick to their guns. Now, if it's working for them, don't knock it. But you won't change their mind, you know. You can't tell them that you can grow a Phalaenopsis standing in a glass of water. They won't have it. They won't believe you. You can show it to them and they won't believe you. They're stuck in their ways. And that's how a lot of the books are. They're stuck in those old ways. And sometimes a bit of change can work wonders. Just do it a bit at a time, not in big chunks. Anyway, that's Sunday done. I've got some other stuff to do. That went on a lot longer than I intended to. But best laid plans, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.